Welcome to Commander Central Episode 4. Today we're going to be talking about the color white in EDH and what strengths and weaknesses it has. As I was prepping this podcast, I had to be very careful about how I worded this discussion to not accidentally use the word white power too frequently in just casual conversation, given what we're seeing around the country right now. Because even referring to white power in the context of Magic is kind of a risky thing to do. So
I better go back through my notes and make sure I didn't put that down too.
So we're going to discuss that. We're going to talk about maybe some games we played. We have another segment we're going to try. We're going to talk about changes we made to decks and how those worked out. But first, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
And welcome to Episode 4. How is everyone doing this week?
It's a new week, so let's go from there.
Chris went camping this weekend and was just telling us about how...
Yeah, it was miserable. We got rained on pretty much all weekend. And then decided to go four-wheeling on Saturday when we had an hour break from the rain.
How'd that work out for you?
We got lost for 3 hours and ended up getting caught in the rain.
Really?
Oh,
Yes.
no.
So it went from like miserable to more miserable pretty much.
Yes, pretty much.
Did you come home early?
Yes, we did. We came home Saturday night, left all our crap there and came home because I had my niece and nephew and my son with. And I was like, no, the kids just need to come home, and didn't know what I was going to do for supper that night. So I'm like, well, we're just going to go to Pizza Hut then.
There you go.
Right, there you go.
I came home Saturday night from the bar and I didn't see your car, and then I got up to go get my car Sunday morning and you were home. I'm like, oh, he came home early. I figured they'd be there till like this afternoon.
Yeah, it was a miserable day.
Well, I had a pretty quiet weekend, except this little story I'm going to quick relay. And I had to take a screenshot of this on my phone and send it to Max as proof it occurred. So my mom is on Facebook because she is. And you can get those little, like, those overlays over your picture on Facebook that say, you know, it's Celebrate National Corn Dog Day or whatever like random thing is going on that week. You can get these things that go over your picture. And because of the stuff in Charlottesville, she had put one over her picture that said Stand Against Racism. And then with the hurricane coming, there was one that said Pray for Texas. And she had applied that to her picture as well without removing the first one. And I'm not joking, the way it lined up over her picture, it said Pray for Texas Racism.
Oh, no.
I took a screenshot of it to prove it to Max.
Yeah.
I'm not going to like post it anywhere because my mom's face over Pray for Texas Racism. And that's, you know, not a great look for anyone to have. But yeah, so that I had to send her a text immediately. I'm like, by the way, Mom, are you aware your Facebook picture says Pray for Texas Racism? And her phone says, oh my God, I'll change it. By the way, I just bought a Harley.
Whoa.
So then I'm like, okay. And clearly she wanted me to ask more questions, but I didn't because I didn't want to get into it. But I texted my sister and I'm like, so did you see Mom bought a Harley? And her like immediate response back to me is, well, now we know how Mom dies.
Wow.
So that was in the span of like 3 minutes. Those two things occurred.
Oh, that is great.
Yeah. So how are games this week? Let's get on to some actual Magic conversation. You guys play anything cool?
Yeah, I played a very interesting game with our younger generation that plays at our local game store. They have this weird concoction that they made up where you play with Pixis of Pandemonium set in the center of the table.
So like it's always available to anyone all the time?
Kind of.
Okay.
So you start your game normal, roll C goes first, all that, draw your 7 cards. Then you roll a D6. And that number that shows up on the D6 gets set on the Pixis. First person that goes, during their upkeep, everyone exiles the top card of their library to the Pixis. Now, you do this, go around in rotation until the Pixis hits, the 6 on the Pixis hits 0.
Does it tick down on everybody's turn or like
Yes,
a
once
cycle?
per turn it ticks down.
Okay.
So then the person who ends up on that turn, everyone flips their cards over and all permanents immediately come into play. So it's a very, very big chaos-y game, but it was actually really fun.
Does the Pixis reset then?
Yes. Then after that, you roll another D6 and do the whole thing over again.
Nice.
Wow.
Well, that
So,
sounds like a fun like chaos variant to do once in a while.
I think the first game that we played, the guy who it ended up popping on ended up going turn 1 Cage Sun into Krenko into massive amounts of goblins, and I just sat there and cried.
Yeah, that sounds awful. But like fun to see it happen once in a while.
Yes.
I think I'd be willing to try that over. Every now and then we do plane chase EDH. I feel like that won't take 4 hours.
No, the games are really fast. I will tell you that.
Plane Chase EDH winds up being slow, and it's fun to do once. Like I like to do one game once a month, and then I've had my fill and I'm good with it. So were there any more games anybody played that were interesting?
I kind of whooped some kid playing Noy and Dar.
And you were really swinging pretty hard at the Noy and Dar deck. Was there any particular reason like you wanted the deck off the table?
I just picked him.
And to be fair, like he was putting threats together pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would move as fast as it did, and he had some 16 lands stuff going on.
I was gonna say,
pretty
didn't I see a
fast.
Celestial Colonnade sitting there with like 12 counters on it at one point?
And there was a Fairy Conclave at one
Conclave.
point with a bunch of counters on it, so it like turned over pretty quickly.
It is fun though when they go to attack with the land to strip mine it
You
instead
did,
of
I
just
saw
signing
that.
a blocker.
And he did do that. He's like, "Oh man, I didn't see the strip mine."
When did you play that? Turn 1.
That was your opening. That was your
Oh.
opening play too. Yeah, that was awesome.
I'll admit it. I was planning to play Brago that game, and I saw him bring out Noy and Dar. I'm like, okay, I don't want a 2 blue-white decks 3 because you're playing.
I was playing Sphinxes. I think,
Sphinxes.
that game.
And I'm like, oh, that'll shut Jamoka will shut that deck down because it was the only other deck I brought that week.
Right.
So I just whipped out Jamoka, and he read the card. He goes, oh, my deck just loses now.
Oh, sure. Right. Yeah.
So Dana, speaking of Brago, can I go into a rant right now?
Sure, you may.
So we played against one of the younger kids. He is 15 years old.
Yeah.
And he was playing a Brago deck. He ended up going off with Stryonic Resonator, Brago, and Reality Acid.
Yep.
Now, in Dana's frustration, he scooped up the game because he knew it was about to happen. Now, I wish I could have reached across the table and slapped the other guy that we were playing with, because you do not point out to your opponent that you hit lands first. If he would have targeted any of our creatures first, we would have stopped it.
And I wouldn't have scooped had I been paying more attention. Because once I saw that, I'm like, oh, I didn't have to scoop. I could have let it. I mean, there was little chance I had to win that game at that point, but I wouldn't have scooped to scoop the board state. I just thought it was going to go through and take everyone's lands out and end the game within a
you
turn.
thought how it was supposed to be.
Right. And I was the first person in priority, and I was getting hit first, so I just scooped. But yeah,
As I watched
longer.
where he was going with the enchantment, I wish that our good friend would have just shut his mouth and let him go onto a creature like he was about to, and then been like, oh, well, we all have sack outlets or a flicker outlet of some sort. We flicker it, your Reality Acid disappears.
Right.
You just stop the combo right there.
Now I had no way to deal with it, so I was he was hitting me first, so I was definitely going to get ran through. But yeah, that was a mistake on his end. We also all screwed up because number one, because he's 15 years old and we all know each other. We let him go for a long period of time.
I don't think we
doing
attacked
stuff.
him once.
We didn't.
Either.
Like we would just let him goldfish until he hit a combo. So that was also not great play.
Tisk on you guys.
But
Have I taught you nothing?
I do have to
Exactly.
admit, Max, I do like playing against yours because you don't go full out Stryonic Resonator combo. You do it enough to
Get
put
ahead.
yourself into the lead, and then you stop there.
Yeah, because he enlightened tutored for that.
Yep.
So he went straight for the combo as soon as he had a chance. But I mean, we had ample opportunity to shut him down. We just didn't.
Right.
And I was in that game, and that was the one I was going to talk about too. And it was.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, that
I
was
just wanted
mine,
to go into
so-
a rant because
Nope.
as soon as Max brought up Brago, I was like, oh, I got to lay this out now.
So let's move on to news. Was there anything that happened today, Max? I think there was. Today there's a lot of stuff.
There was a lot of stuff happening today. Wizards of the Coast posted 2 articles all about Ixalan today. The first one going in about the leaks we saw a couple months ago, mid-June, I think.
I think so, yeah.
When the full print sheets were stolen and posted online, they kind of went through the security and how the guy just got away with it.
Well, it made sense too because after that sheet was stolen, it was clearly the picture was taken like on the floor in someone's apartment or whatever it was. So he clearly had stolen the sheet, but I kept wondering why we weren't getting any more pictures because the one that was taken, the one we saw, was a terrible, like, it's Bigfoot in the distance, blurry photo. And I kept wondering why we didn't get another one. Well, it's because he was arrested immediately.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, like quickly. Like they found out who he was and had the police there immediately. So that was the only picture that leaked, and he didn't get a chance to do anything else because he was in cuffs quickly.
Yep. So in that first article, they said, okay, since these got out there, we're gonna preview every card that was spoiled or partially spoiled in those photos. So they released 60 some cards today.
Good chunk of and they didn't care for. They just
Said,
they
"Here you go."
didn't- Yeah, if they were on the sheet, they showed them.
Yep.
So that was a nice thing getting a preview. And I'm sure we'll get into that more in depth down the road.
Yep. The second article was explaining the mechanics we'll see in Ixalan. a bunch of them. We have a raid is returning. We get
Which was cons or
which was
dragons?
that block.
Yeah.
We get a bunch of new ones, but the biggest one we will kind of speak of right now is the Planeswalker rule is going away, and all Planeswalkers going forward, and they're going to be eroded to say Legendary Planeswalker dash Jace.
Right.
I remember hearing a rumor about this, 2 months ago or something?
And I
It
think
was
that
on
was
the sheet.
because of that leak sheet, because you could see it said Legendary Planeswalker on it.
Okay.
So the really the logical assumption from that was that they were going to change the rule, and that's basically exactly what is happening.
Yep. So the Planeswalker uniqueness rule, I think it
Yeah.
was
Yep.
called, is going away. So that was where you couldn't have two different Jaces out at the same time because it was dash Jace. Now it's replaced by the legend rule, so you can have Jace Vryn's Prodigy or whatever he flips into, and Jace Memory Adept out at the same time.
And that's going to affect a lot of stuff. It's not like breaking anything in the game, but it makes makes it Super Friends archetype stronger, and it makes quite a few commanders stronger, and it affects a few support cards too. We might do a show on that next week. We'll see how much stuff there is, but there's a lot to talk about there that will affect a lot of decks.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's primarily it. I had an article out in EDH Rec today, I think, about the history of vampires in Commander. Basically, like, if you want to do a vampire tribal deck, I basically went along the timeline, and with this expansion we got one more, and this one we got two more, and like when you got the first legendary one. So I went through the entire list from the beginning of Magic to see what vampires we had. It was pretty interesting to go back through because there weren't good ones up until basically modern. I mean, they were all pretty bad prior to then. The Ascendant of Inkar, which is the Krovax one, that's kind of a mini Elish Norn, was the best one, basically pre-modern.
Wow.
But it was cool going back through, and they were all really expensive to cast too. Like they were all 5 drops or more. Baron Singular is an 8 drop, I think.
Yep.
And he wasn't even a vampire at the time; he was a legend. So it was cool to go back through. So that is up on EDH Rec. How about listener feedback, Chris? What do we got?
We heard from @EDH Brewmaster on Twitter. He brought to our attention that sound volumes on the iPhone podcast app were really low. We're looking into this issue and will remedy it as soon as we find the problem. If anyone else is seeing any other tech issues, please let us know so we can get it fixed and bring you the best show we can.
And I think we have that figured out, why that was. So hopefully that will not be a problem going forward.
Yep. I'll keep working on it.
For everyone else, you can reach us on Twitter @CMDR Central, and you can search us up on Facebook @Commander Central.
We're going to do a quick little news section here I want to revisit maybe once every 6 weeks or so and talk about changes we made to decks that we play. I think it's kind of a useful exercise to say, oh, I thought this card was going to work very well in my deck, and then did it work or did it not work, or why did it or why didn't it? So the first one I want to bring up here that pops up for me, and Chris mentioned this in the show last week, having played my Sphinx deck, is I put Disallow in that deck when it came out, and I've now since replaced it. And here's why. Disallow is a really cool card, I think, on paper. It's cancel with an upside. It's Void Slime, essentially. It's easier to cast. It's mono blue Void Slime.
Yep.
So it can counter a spell, can counter an activated ability or a triggered ability. And that seems really great on paper. The reality I discovered was I was running cancel. I think one time I used the Stifle to hit a Charbelcher trigger, I think, and then just died to the Charbelcher next turn. So it bought me a turn, I guess, and that's better than a cancel would have done. But every other time I cast a spell, I just cast a counterspell. I never used the 2 Stifle variants. It's nice to have a modular effect on a card. I love modular stuff. I mean, Austere Command is my favorite board wipe for that reason. But if you're not using the abilities, the other modes, then it's really not that modular. If all you ever use Austere Command for is to kill creatures CMC 3 or less and 4 or more, you should be running Wrath of God.
Right.
And in this case, I was looking at that Disallow, and all I ever used it for was as a counter spell. So I decided to try Forbid in its place. And you alone, Chris, playing my deck one time, got more utility from Forbid than I ever did from Disallow.
I think I cast it 6 or 7 times in that game.
Yep, I do remember that.
And I know I've done buyback on it 2 or 3 times, not 6 or 7 times, but I've done it multiple times. That's more utility in the 3 weeks spent in the deck than I got from Disallow in probably 3 or 4 months. So anyway, that's my change I wanted to talk about. Was I tried Disallow and it didn't work, and that was why. So then trying Forbid, it did work great for me. Now maybe in a different meta where you have a lot of stuff that you want to stifle, that's different. Or maybe if you have a super heavy counterspell deck where you have 3 counterspells in hand and you can just use your counterspell on one thing and say the Disallow to use the modular effect, that might be different. But like in my deck where I have 5 counterspells total, the modular just didn't do any good for me. And the buyback on Forbid has been fantastic. So that was a change I made. Is there anything from you guys you want to mention here?
Yeah, I got one. About a month ago, I took Enlightened Tutor out of Dromoka.
Okay, I didn't even notice you took it out.
Yep, and I replaced it with Berserk.
Oh, well, I knew you added Berserk, so...
So the reasoning was the Enlightened Tutor only ever got True Conviction.
Sure.
Which is great, but 7 mana in a turn sometimes is hard.
And then they can remove it in response
Right.
to whatever.
Well, if it's my turn, they can't.
That's true.
But
That's true.
it was a card that was only getting another card. I never got anything else in the deck.
Well, then if True Conviction's in your hand or in your graveyard already,
Right.
you have no real good targets for it then at that
Except
point.
a mana rock that
Right.
isn't going to do me much. So I put Berserk in instead because it's a nice way to get damage through that people can't counter if Dromoka's out.
And how's that worked out for you?
It has killed many people.
Yeah, I mean, it's killed me at least once.
Yeah.
So that's nice. So you went from a way to get just 1 win condition to now 2 win conditions, essentially.
Yes.
That makes sense. I like that.
Yeah. So on your Dromoka deck,
Uh-oh.
I have a suggestion. Let you think about Fracturing Gusts.
Fracturing Gust
Think on it.
in a game last week hit hard.
Seeing how you don't play much in the way of enchantments and artifacts, and it's a life gain deck.
True.
The only thing I would say is you do already gain enough life, and at some point it becomes overkill.
And you become the target.
And it hits your own stuff too, which it's nice to be greedy sometimes.
Yep.
No, you shouldn't be greedy. You should only be greedy for the win.
But there are situations where I have decks that I look at and I'm like, I only have 4 enchantments in this deck and there's only like 8 artifacts. I really should run a sweeper because like there's no reason for me to be greedy about losing 1 enchantment when I'm gonna hit 6 other ones with the spell. So people definitely can be too greedy, and I'm totally guilty of that.
Agreed.
It's nice, but for 1 more mana, I can play Austere Command and have 2 other choices.
True. I was just thinking of another sweeper
Right.
type effect in that deck.
Somebody played it against Chris and I in a game last week. And
it
gained a
hurt so
ton of
bad.
life, and it was.
Right.
I didn't like seeing that at all.
I already have, I think, 4 or 5 board wipes in that deck.
Okay.
So I don't know if adding 1 more is really going to do me good.
Okay.
Sure.
Thought I'd bring it up.
No, great suggestion. I will definitely think about it, though.
Well, let's start talking about the main show here, which is Mono White and EDH. So we're going to do a series on this. We're not going to do it like every week. We'll do 1 show a month or something, or every 6 weeks. We're going to hit each color and discuss their strengths and weaknesses, particularly in EDH. But today's show, since we're going to start, we'll go in order. So we'll start with White today. So first thing and the easiest thing to ask is, what's the most positive thing that you think White brings to the table when you play it in Commander?
Go ahead, Chris.
I would have to say removal. Whether
Okay.
it be creature removal, enchantment removal, whatever. You got everything from your mass removal, your board wipes, to your target removals and swords and path, down to Banishing Light and Oblivion Ring. I mean, you can pretty much hit anything that you need to hit.
I wrote pretty much the exact same thing.
It's probably not a coincidence that I did too. I mean, is it the best removal in the game? Probably. It hits everything. White can deal with any problem.
Yes.
And it has single target removal answers for almost everything. I don't think it can single target remove planeswalkers.
No.
I don't think lands, but it can sweep everything. It can hit everything with a sweeper, and it can single target artifacts, creatures, enchantments. Yeah, that's exactly the first thing. And I would say, as far as like creature removal, Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile are the 2 best single target creature removal spells ever printed, period.
Yeah, that's totally true.
I think we're all kind of in agreement that that's White's strength. So what's White's big weakness, you think, that it has? The number one, there's a lot of them, but so what's the big weakness?
Card draw?
I think this is not going to be this question's going to have the same answer, because Chris is laughing here, and I feel like he's going to say card draw as well.
I believe its biggest weakness is card draw. Now, there are some cards in there that allow you to draw. You have Oblation, and you have a lot of 1 mana, 2 mana spells that target something and then let you draw cards, so they're pretty much replacement draws.
Sure.
Other than that, it doesn't have anything along the lines of your Serum Visions, stuff that gives you a draw plus extra built into it.
White, when it uses its resources up, they kind of stay gone.
Yes.
It doesn't replace itself very well, particularly in terms of card draw, card advantage. And that's a really tough weakness to get around. Like, black can steamroll ahead if there's an enchantment out, for the most part. There's some enchantments, if there's a propaganda out and the person, and you're swinging with a token deck, there's not a lot you can do about that.
Yep.
But you can outrace somebody. White doesn't outrace anybody, and if it is out of resources, you're just out of resources. That's just the way it is. So those are the big ones, I would say. It's great at removing stuff. It's terrible at card draw and getting resources back.
Keeping up.
So, okay, so what other strengths, though, like aside from removal, what does white do that's useful, that it brings to the game, that you think makes it worth playing?
Cheap creatures that kind of work together.
Okay.
So
Sure. I mean, white is it the best swarm colors for token generation? Green's up there,
They're
but
pretty close to. I
Yeah.
mean, if you build them together, it's definitely the
Right.
best.
honestly, what makes you think of green is I'm like doubling season. But
and the Peril Lives.
if you remove doubling season from the equation, now that white has Unended Procession,
Yep.
I mean, Catherine's Crusade's pretty great in a token deck too.
Right.
It's just doubling season is so broken.
White gives you more support for tokens than green does.
Yeah.
And green you get doubling season.
White also has a lot of the tokens have flying, so they have
Yep.
baked-in evasion, and greens usually don't.
And white creatures make tokens. So like Captain of the Watch, you get
Tokens with
the
it.
tokens with it.
Yep. I see white. A good thing with it would be it's got huge amounts of survivability, depending on how you build. Between your removal to life gain to nullifying a damage.
Sure.
Over that, I mean, as you guys said, you can pump out a bunch of creatures, and block all day as long as you're not getting trampled on.
I think defensively, I actually that's all kind of white's the best defensive color. Whether you're talking about removing creatures or you're talking about gaining life is a defensive ability.
Yep.
White has a lot of fogs. Like it's not as many as green, but like Dawn Charm is a really good card.
Yep.
Holy Day.
The Holy Day, Teferi's Protection is essentially a fog.
Angel's Grace.
Angel's Grace, right. There's a lot of really good fog abilities. It also has, I mentioned Propaganda. Well, Ghostly Prison is in white.
Yep.
And there's the 5-mana enchantment one.
Sphere of Safety.
Sphere of Safety. And there's one another one whose name I've forgotten. I apparently can't remember any enchantments tonight, where you can only attack left or right.
Oh, from one of the Commander
Yeah.
products. Yep.
But there's like multiple different ones like that. There's Aurification, where if a creature deals combat damage to you, it becomes a wall.
Yep.
Or it gains a defender. So white has a pretty good Pillow Fort built in. It has pretty good tax abilities built in. I mean, Aura of Silence is really, really annoying.
Yeah, it's so good though.
Yeah,
That's a beautiful card.
or Kismet or Blind Obedience, where stuff comes into play tapped.
Yep.
I mean, so
you got your Thalias that do that too.
right. Or the Flash creature where you can only search the first 4 cards of your library.
Even Mind Sensor.
Even Mind Sensor. Man, I can't remember anything right now.
It's awesome we got a reprint on that because he was crawling up in price for the original.
Yeah, it
No,
was.
it's terrible. I like the original art, the original border, and now he's like
He
$1.
doesn't he doesn't look like a bird anymore neither with the reprint. I don't know what's going on.
But that is a great card, particularly to be able to flash in against somebody tutoring something up, or even against a fetch land. That feels so bad to see a Mind Sensor come out when you're going for your land with a fetch. And you're like, it's not going to be in the top 4 cards here, is it? No, it is not. I just
Oh.
cracked a land for no use. So yeah, I think you can sum up white by saying it's the best defensive color. Weaknesses then are, I think, what the real problem is, because I think universally Boros is understood to be the weakest color combination of the 10 guilds.
Yep.
In Commander, I would go
In
with
Commander, for sure. It's different in Standard and stuff, but
Yep.
In Commander, and a large part of that is neither of them have card draw. Like red doesn't have great draw either.
Right.
So let's say you're playing a white deck. How do you deal with your lack of resources? So what are some ways, particularly the card draw? Let's start with that. But I know Max has played a mono white deck for sure, and Chris has played white. I don't think you have a mono white deck.
I did have one at one point. I was playing Brimaz, King of Areskos,
that's right,
I
you
think
were.
is how you pronounce it.
So we've all played mono white. I have a Dejero deck now, and we have friends that play mono white. So like, what are some of the ways you get around the lack of draw?
Artifacts.
Yeah.
Honestly, I have to say
Yep.
artifacts are the way to go.
Find a way to get Skull Clamp into your deck.
Skull Clamp. Now, Skull Clamp is great, period. But yeah, mono white where you can make tokens.
Right.
Mentor the Meek.
Mentor the Meek is really good. It's in like, I looked this up. It's in like 10,000 decks in EDH Rec.
It kind of has to be if you're playing
If
white.
you're playing white, there are so few draw options.
Right.
Now, I don't love Mentor the Meek maybe as much as some people because I don't like having to, you have to pay the mana to draw the card. It's on a pretty fragile body. You have to play the creature.
And the creature has to be, is fragile itself. You just can't draw off of like a Sun Titan. It's the 2 or less for
2
power.
or less. So you have to have a certain deck for it. I think it might get played a little bit too much because I've seen plenty of people drop Mentor the Meek, and I've looked at their deck and been like, how are you drawing cards? You're not going to draw anything off that. You've got like, your commander isn't going to draw off it. Your 4 creatures in play right now are all, 4/6s or something. But yeah, in the right deck, Mentor the Meek is fantastic.
I think in mono white, it would be better than, I know like in my Alesha Mardu, I cut her because even though my creatures are so small, I have better options to go with, such as black card draw.
Yeah,
and
just
stuff
having
like
black there makes it not.
I did the same thing in Brago. I cut him or her because, yeah, all my creatures are power 2 or less, but I'm wasting mana to draw a card when Muldrifter draws and Cloudblazer draws,
Right.
and I saw there many draw options in that deck. It just I didn't want to waste my mana on it.
Whereas I've seen it in our friend Frank's Kemba deck, draw quite a few cards because every one of those cats coming in,
Yep.
you spend your mana and draw.
I have seen that backfire on him though too when
For
he
sure.
plays an enchantment that makes him 3/3s, and then he's like, "Oh, well,
Now
I can't draw anymore."
You bet. I've seen that. It happened like a week or two ago when we were
Yep.
playing against him. So Chris mentioned mentioned artifacts. So what are the artifact draw spells aside from Skull Clamp that you like?
Staff of Nin, I guess, would be one that works for you but doesn't work against you at the same time.
I was just gonna say I think we have to look at the artifacts that only help you, and then the
Sure.
artifacts that help everybody. And everybody knows here that we hate helping our opponents.
Right.
Yes.
And there's definitely there's 2 different groups of those. And Staff and Nin is a card that's probably unplayable outside of mono white. And in mono
Agreed.
white, you're like, oh man, that's not bad at all. 6 mana to draw me a card and I can kill a 1/1. That's pretty good mono white.
And you're playing white, so I mean, you have a bunch of survivability, like I said earlier.
Right.
So you just sit back and drop it down and pray to God no one removes it, I guess.
Yeah. And if people are removing your Staff of Nin for the most part, they've lost a removal spell to removing Staff of Nin. I mean, it sucks to lose it, but there's going to be something way scarier than a Staff of Nin coming down that you
In
should be
2 or
saving
3 turns.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
That you should save your removal for. Mind's Eye is pretty good even outside white. Like Mind's Eye is a pretty solid card. Well, here's the thing about Mind's Eye. I see Max shaking.
I disagree with you.
Okay. I'm curious what you say. I think I have a counter to this. Why do you not like Mind's Eye?
I don't like spending mana outside of casting spells to draw cards. Same reason I didn't like Mentor the Meek.
I understand that. That's
I don't want
fair
to.
point.
I don't want to plan that far ahead, knowing that I can either do this or I might save this 3 mana and not cast the spell and draw 3 cards.
Here's how I've found the times I've played Mind's Eye when it works well, and it doesn't work well early. Number one, it's 5 mana to cast, so you don't. If you use it on turn 5 when you have 5 mana available, then your turn's done and you can't draw off it.
Yep.
So I get what you're saying, Max, but like you have to think of it like something that you use a little bit later in the game. Like turn 5, it's not going to do you any good. You don't want to cast it on turn 5 or something when you have no mana free because you've just time walked yourself and accomplished nothing. You want to cast on like turn 7 or 8 or something, because that's when you cast Blue Sun Zenith too. Like Blue Sun Zenith, you don't want to draw 2 cards for the most part. You want to cast it on turn 7 when you're just going to pass your turn when things are looking fairly stable, and before
Unless
the
you
end
have
of the
nothing
turn,
else to do.
right? And before the end of your turn, I'm going to draw 5 cards. Well, that's kind of how you have to play Mind's Eye. You're like, okay, I'm my turn 7 here. I've got a few things that I can block with. I can survive a crackback. I'll be all right. I'm going to play Mind's Eye, and with the last 3 mana, I'm just going to plan on drawing 3 cards off you and you and you.
Okay.
And 3 cards in white is all the cards. It
Huge.
feels like all the cards in the world. It feels like you've drawn 10 in a different color. So yeah, it's not a perfect card, and man, I don't know, outside of Boros flavors, I don't know where I would run it. It's probably not worth it, but it's so good in white or Boros. So Mind's Eye is definitely one that does really good work in that color combination.
I can get behind that.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree. I know the times I've played it, it probably was in colors that didn't need it.
Sure.
Or even in Boros, I was playing pretty aggro of a deck, so I didn't want to hold the mana to draw a card where I could equip someone with 2 or 3 pieces of equipment and swing in for a kill.
Tamiyo's Journal does pretty good work in white as well.
I love Tamiyo's Journal.
I mean, it's also the kind of card that's been like Staff and Nin, where people better not be removing that, or they're assessing threat poorly.
Right.
It could come down to, because I do Batameo's Journals, when you have 5 clues.
3.
3
3
clues.
clues. Wow, I
But-
was way
Yeah.
off on that one.
You only get the clue at your upkeep. So like Mind's Eye, you play it on turn 5.
It doesn't
It
do
doesn't
anything.
do anything till turn 6. But
I could see an argument for removing it when you have a stacked load of
Sure.
clues accumulated.
It's also a reason to maybe kind of keep cracking those clues.
Yep.
To just keep the draw and to make yourself not the threat, because it's much less threatening to draw the extra card than it is to have the ability to tutor
Yeah.
sitting there on the
Yes.
field.
I run that in Dramoka, and that's exactly what I do. If I sense the game states where I don't need to worry about it being removed, I let the clues stack up. If I'm concerned about them taking out the journal before I hit 3 clues, I burn a clue at the end of your turn and, move on to my next turn. Or half the time I get the clue and burn it right away, so I get 2 draws.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that makes sense. There's also a few like sketchier bad draw spells, like Inheritance. I think is a 4 mana. I think for an enchantment, and when a creature dies, you can spend 3 mana to draw a card one time. So you can spend 3 mana to draw a card if something dies. Maybe in mono white, particularly if you had some kind of enchantment theme, but
Or if you're stacked with removal.
yeah, I guess. But again, it wouldn't trigger off Path or Swords because they're exile effects.
That is true.
So, and I was saying, like, if you cast a board wipe, well, I guess you can spend 3 mana to draw 1 card, but that's pretty inefficient.
Probably wouldn't work neither. I mean, mono white, if I were to build mono white, I'd definitely be slotting in Rest in Peace.
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
very tempted to, for sure. So then that eliminates that as well.
A card I actually like is Well of Lost Dreams.
Yeah, particularly if you have life gain,
Right. And white has
quite a
a
bit.
lot of lifelink in that color. And that's where when you gain life, you pay X, and X is less than or equal to the amount of life you gained. If you do, draw X cards.
And you can draw, you could draw 5 cards if you're getting 5 life, you can draw a pretty
Yep.
good amount.
For 4 mana, so I mean, if you play it on turn 5 and you swing and you tap 1, there you go, you just drew a card.
One that also works pretty good is Scroll Rack combined with Land Tax. If you can grab 3 lands off Land Tax because you're behind, and then Scroll Rack 3 cards to put those lands back on top and draw 3. The problem is, in the next turn when it comes around again, you Land Tax up, so you get to shuffle your library to grab 3 lands, then Scroll Rack again. It's pretty fragile, and
It totally didn't work for me when I had it going.
right. Well, and you have to have the shuffle effect there. You have to have both together, because Scroll Rack by itself winds up just being an annoying dividing top for the most part if you
Yes.
don't have a way to shuffle. So Land Tax does both things simultaneously. It gets you 3 cards, and it lets you shuffle every turn, so you're not looking at the same thing every time. But you have to have both out, like to have some kind of draw to accomplish what most other colors can do with like 1 card. You need 2 pieces, and it requires an activated ability, and it requires you to have less land than somebody else.
Yep.
So that just shows how desperate white is for draw. And you mentioned Oblation. I think that is one that people don't run enough. Oblation was a big deal back when Tuck was a thing, because you could put someone's commander in the bottom of their library and
Don't even remind me of the horror days.
Bye-bye, Mogus.
see you, Mogus.
Oh,
I'm going to deglamour that.
Bye, Sliver Queen.
all the time.
Since that's no longer a thing, I have not seen Oblation played a whole lot, because
Or Condemn.
you don't see much Condemn either anymore. But Oblation, I think people probably should run more often, particularly in mono white decks, because number 1, it hits anything. It deals with any kind of problem you have out there. But number 2, if you're playing a token deck, which most white decks are making tokens, it winds up being sacrifice a 1/1 creature to draw 2 cards for 3 mana. That's not great, but in mono white, that's not terrible. I
Yeah.
mean, what does black pay? Black pays 2 mana to sack a creature and draw a card. This is 1 more than that, and it has essentially the modular ability to destroy a permanent. That's
Right.
not bad.
No.
I usually run it in response to them taking out my big beater. I put it in my deck and draw.
Right.
couple
Like if you
cards.
have no targets worth removing and someone removes your dude, I can't save it, but I can draw 2 cards off it. So yeah, that's one I think people don't use enough. And there's a few things like, Pure Steel Paladin or Mesa Enchantress, where if you're in the right deck, you can draw cards off that, but that's much less reliable.
More a build around.
Yeah. And we touched on this briefly, but we might as well go into it one more time, is the cards that draw for everybody. So Howling Mine or Font of Mythos or Temple Bell. I don't I don't run them. In my mono white deck, I don't run any of those. And I don't know, do you guys?
I run Howling Mind but that's it. I don't run Temple Bell or
At least
Font.
Howling Mind you can kind of turn off if you have something in hand that will tap it. You can turn it off. Otherwise, yeah, I don't like the math on Howling Mind.
And honestly, like in our meta, since everybody else hates helping everybody too, it's gone pretty quick. You don't.
Yeah.
That doesn't stick around.
Or you're gone because
Right.
people don't want to see you helping everyone else draw cards.
It could be something to consider if you are playing in a meta where they see something that's helping someone else and they get rid of it. Because then what it becomes is, you burned something to get rid of that you could have burned on something better.
Or there's probably some metas where, like, if you play a Howling Mind, people will protect you or not attack you because they want it out there.
I've done that before.
I still think long term, you're helping everyone else probably more than you're helping yourself. I don't know if that's good for you, but maybe there's some places where it is.
I agree. I mean, it comes back to that whole you burn out your resources too fast. So if
Yeah.
you're drawing 2 cards, you can only play 1 land a turn and maybe a spell. You're going to be discarding if you don't have a Reliquary Tower or a Thought Vessel or anything.
Well,
Pretty quick.
And you're drawing 1 card in your white deck that probably isn't combo based, and the black player is drawing draw cards twice as fast
Yep.
to draw twice as many cards, or the blue player is drawing to his combo much faster. So I don't think it helps you as much as it helps other people, but it's an option. So we talked about a few other problems with white. It's problem and advantage. Like Max mentioned, small creatures, which is advantage because you can swarm, but it also makes combat damage pretty tricky in mono white sometimes. But there's ways around that. Like, how do you deal with that? Because you guys have seen enough token decks in play. So what scares you the most when you see a white deck with tokens?
A Drowsy Monument.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure.
Cathar's Crusade.
God, Cathar's Crusade, number 1, the math gets annoying on it.
Yep.
But like in the right situation, you just die. Like if there's a couple tokens out, say 3 or 4, which is nothing in white, and Cathar's Crusade is on the field and they play 3 or 4 more tokens, those all suddenly become like 6/6s or 7/7s. Or if there's some, there's ways to make more tokens than that. Increasing devotion can throw 10 in the field at once.
Bramaz makes 1, but it just keeps stacking.
Right.
I mean, it stampedes fast.
Another procession makes the tokens that someone casts, they get twice as many now. So yeah, Crusade is a win condition in a weenie deck. But even like Heliod, what's addicted to Heliod, giving your creatures +2/+2. If there's like 10 or 12 tokens on the field, and you're like, oh, I'm at 32 life, I don't care about that. Okay, I can take 2 hits before I have to worry about it. And I'll kill that person before that. That's fine. Oh, here comes Dictated Heliod. Oh, now those 12 tokens.
I
hit me
have
for
done that
36.
before in a game with my Alessia build where you swing in with like 7 guys and they're like, okay, I just won't block. I have like 50 life. And you're like, okay, Dictated Heliod. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, that's great.
Well, it's the same thing with Eldrazi Monument. Even though it only gives +1/+0, it does give evasion.
Yeah,
And there's
flying.
been a
And indestructible.
And there's been a bunch of times where I've been looking at the board state going, oh, that's only 6 tokens. I'm absolutely going to be fine because I can block 3 of them, and who cares if I take 3 damage. And suddenly those 6 tokens become 12 damage that you can't block any of. That radically changes the math. And then you're like, okay, now they're indestructible, so that board wipe in my hand does me no good. I just have to hope I can deal with a monument or I'm dead next turn.
Yep.
So yeah, for sure. And white is the color, talking about white strengths, white is the color of anthems.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it is.
It has a bunch of good ones and a bunch of ones that do. There's even ones that do weird things, whether or not it's Elish Norn, who anthems your stuff while it kills
I
other
forgot about the
people's
old
things.
banana head.
Right. Or there's, is it Marshall's Anthem that can bring something back from the graveyard?
Yep, with the kicker cost.
With a kicker cost, and then turn into a...
It automatically gives them +1/+1, and then with the kicker, you get to bring something back from the graveyard to play.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good utility. There's also white board wipes that make you tokens or protect your tokens. Like white has the most board wipes, period, but it also has quite a few that are conditional, that if you've built your deck cleverly around a thing, I'm going to destroy all non-token permanents, and I'm the only person with tokens out.
Yep. I know the instant speed board wipes they have are quite an annoyance.
Oh, for sure.
But they're super
They
expensive.
usually are expensive to
Yes.
cast. What is there? There's Route and there's...
Fated Retribution.
Retribution.
I don't know if you guys have this issue, but when I'm playing against a white type of deck, I'm not usually counting their mana like I am against blue.
Absolutely,
Like,
for
oh,
sure.
Yeah.
7 mana, okay, he's got Rift mana open. White, you don't ever really think about it until it happens, and you're like, oh yeah, I should have been paying attention.
Well, it's the same thing with talking about combat tricks. That's a good example. I always forget that Dawn Charm is a thing, or the fog effects. I mean, it's really easy in green. For some reason, in green, you're always ready for something, or in blue, you're always like, okay, is there going to be a rift here or an
Right.
Aetherize? I never remember to like pay attention to white.
Yep.
I actually wrote down white is not a reactive color. Like when you're playing blue or green, you have
Or at
you have
least you don't
tricks.
think it is.
Right. I always I forget it is, like you guys are saying.
Like I've very few times have I ever been shocked by a cyclonic rift coming down. I've eaten so many Angels of the Dire Hour coming down at flash speed to exile all my attacking creatures that I was not ready for at all.
I always forget about route being instant speed for
Yeah.
2 more.
How about we might as well mention it because it's a thing. How about mass land destruction for white?
It's a very big thing in white.
And that's part of the problem. I think that's a problem white has. It's part of the color pie for white, and it's a part of the color pie that's discouraged in Commander. Maybe for good reason, maybe not.
Yep.
So let's say you want to do it correctly. Is there a correct way? And what is that correct way?
You win. After you cast it, you win.
I agree with that. That's
Yeah.
my thought as well.
I'm going to go back to our earlier conversation with, what is that, Teferi's Protection,
Mm-hmm.
where it phases everything out.
Sure.
Float all your mana, blow up the board.
Well, and I think that's kind of what Max and I are. I assume
Yeah.
that's what you meant as well. Or you've Avacyn out. I'm playing Avacyn, and then I'm gonna cast Armageddon, and I'm not gonna win next turn, but I'm gonna win 3 turns from now because no one has land out and no one has anything out, and I have Avacyn and probably some other stuff. Then mass land destruction, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't bother me a bit. If you have a plan to utilize it, so I think you can utilize mass land destruction as part of your white deck if you know how to do it without just annoying everyone.
Agreed.
The problem is that's not how it plays out far too often.
No, not at all.
Because you can just cast a Wrath of God and everyone bounces back 2 turns later, even if you don't have a plan. If you Armageddon with no plan, you can screw up the game for 15 minutes.
And probably the rest of your night.
Well, right. And right, because everyone's just going to at that point kill you
Yep.
because you're the dummy who Armageddons for no reason. Or worse, spite Armageddons when you're about to lose.
Yes, I have seen that numerous times.
I have too.
I think at least us 3, we've gotten to the point where if that happens, we say, okay, that's fine. You can go ahead and scoop, but that we don't let that resolve.
Right,
Yes.
yeah.
'Cause
you're just out of our game.
Right. Why ruin the 3 other people's nights, the rest of that game, because you're losing and your deck isn't working out tonight.
I would say another problem white has, we haven't mentioned yet, but white doesn't really ramp at all.
I can't really think of anything. Maybe, was that scrying sheets?
Yeah,
That's colorless. I mean,
if you're running snowlands, it only works with
Yep.
snowlands.
Mirrored landscape.
Mirrored landscape is an option. Sword of the Animist.
Yep.
yeah, and then you got your land tax, but that's not technically really
isn't.
ramping.
I think isn't there one creature that does that? Isn't there?
Knight of the White Orchid gets
White
you
Orchid.
2 if you
Um,
don't control as many as an opponent.
There's another.
Core Tartographer puts one into play.
Yep. Any planes. It's not a basic.
I
It's
do.
any planes.
I do believe there's another one, a cat that most recent printing I can remember is Commander 15. It's like Sun Oreskos or something like that. Comes into play. You can search your library for planes. I don't remember if it goes to your hand or not, but I do believe there was another one.
Well, that's kind of a combination there of, that's the one way white can get cards to hand is it can get lands.
Yep.
So that's better than nothing. I mean, if you don't miss your land drops, that's better than missing land drops, I guess. But that's what land tax does. That's what Tithe does. That's what Gift of Estates, I think, is the one where you can get. It's like a bad Tithe. It's sorcery speed, and you can get up to 2 planes, I believe. I think Max is looking it up now
Yep.
to verify. But
And I have the one Chris just mentioned too. So Gift of Estates is 1 and a white for sorcery. If an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for 3 plains cards, reveal them, put them in your hand, and shuffle.
so you get your next 3 land drops for 2 mana. That's not bad.
And
No.
that doesn't say basic.
Oh, really?
You should note that it's
I did
any
not know
plains.
that. Okay.
And then the one Chris was mentioning was Oreskos Explorer for 1 and a white. Creature Cat Scout 2/2. When he ETBs, search your library for up to X plains cards, where X is the number of players who control more lands than you. Reveal them, put them in your hand, shuffle your
So
library.
you should at least get 1, but you might get
Yep.
2 or 3. And those are all also cards that then semi-technically will combo nicely with Scroll Rack.
Yes.
So there are ways to work around all of this. You just have to dig kind of deep for them.
Oh, really deep.
Super
Yeah.
deep.
So we kind of wandered off a little bit off ramp, but I would say white is probably the most dependent on mana rocks of any of the colors. I guess red is pretty dependent too, but I run more rocks in my white decks than I do in other color decks, for sure.
I do too. I know a lot of the good rocks too. You can sack for an additional benefit.
And that helps with white too, when you can crack that Mind Stone on turn 8 and at least get a card out of it when you no longer need the rock, or when you can crack there's a Dreamstone Hedron. Does that get you 3 cards? And then there's a 2, and then there's a 6-drop that gets you 3 when you sack it.
Yep.
So yeah, those are definitely decent. And I think white is also one of the few colors where the cycling lands make a little more sense.
I could get behind that.
I don't know how many you want to run, but turn 1 or 2 or 3 in white, it's maybe worth playing a tapped land. That way later on, if you happen to draw one on turn 10, it's worth the risk of playing a tapped land to have the option on turn 8 or 9 or 10 to pitch it to draw a card if you have too many lands. Particularly because white does have ways to get more lands in the hand. So then if you top deck that one, you can pitch it and draw something. Does white make you not want to play it as a color?
Depends on my mood.
Okay.
Like, I have a mono white deck. I try to keep one monocolored deck around all the time. I'm on white right now, but it hasn't made it to the shop.
No, it's your Odric deck.
Yes.
You've not played it. Is it frustrating? Like, do you find it frustrating as a white deck?
I find it frustrating because it either goes big or I lose on turn 5 because I just can't keep up.
Because you've emptied your hand and your knife, it's never coming back.
Right.
How about you, Chris?
I would love to build one, but honestly, when you think about it, white is better as a support color than as your main color.
White makes pretty much every color better.
Yes.
Maybe not red in Boros because they don't help each other out very much, but white is a fantastic support color. I would say if you would have asked me this 6 or 8 months ago, I would have kind of agreed with Max. For whatever reason, in the last 6 or so months, having played a Boros Avacyn deck, and now I've got a Dejeru Planeswalker deck, I found I kind of enjoy the challenges. Not that I like playing white, but I like having to try to find ways to make it usable. That challenge to me has been fun. Doesn't mean I like white or think it doesn't have a ton of weaknesses, because it's bad to play a mono. Playing a mono white deck comes with plenty of problems, but like working around those problems and finding ways to fix them has been fun. So I've started to enjoy that aspect of it.
I can see that. I know recently I've been kind of in a rut too, where it's just like, seems like everything's the same lately. You start building your deck, you're like, well, I need one of these, I need one of these, I need one of these, because you're always playing similar colors.
Right. Hey, I'm playing, Simic. I can do all the things.
Yep.
I can do everything. The world is my oyster. Whereas you're playing a mono white deck, you're like, oh, I can't do any of the things. I need to figure out how to make this happen. So what do you think they need to fix or they need to do more of to help improve white? So when I think of things that they've changed in the game to help a color, I think of red having added what's called impulse draw, like the Outpost Siege version, where exile the top card of your library and you can, until end of turn, you may play that card, or it goes away. And that's a very, it also fits white. It fits red. It's very thematic. Red is chaotic and doesn't always plan ahead, and so it's thematic, but it also is useful. Like, I love those those impulse draw effects in red.
Except for on turn 5 when you flip a Blasphemous Act and you're just like, wow, that was a waste.
Right.
Yep.
But still, it's better than nothing. I mean, if I'm playing red and it's not paired with another color that's got great draw, Outpost Siege is almost Phyrexian Arena. It feels like Phyrexian Arena in red. It feels like that strong.
It gets you a land.
Yeah, right. If a third of your deck is land, so 1 out of 3 turns, it's just going to get your land drop for you automatically, in addition to having a draw. And if your curve is pretty tight, you can most of the time you can play the card. Occasionally you're going to get boned by that Blasphemous Act or whatever, but it's better than nothing.
I don't foresee Wizards changing the draw mechanic for white, though, because I think it would push people. They'd be less inclined to start building multicolored decks and trying to fix the issue that it has already by putting a different color into it.
We did get Alms Collector
in Commander 17.
Which when someone else draws, you can take one of if they draw more than one card, you can take one of their cards, I believe is how it works. It's a flash. It's a cat with flash.
If an opponent would draw 2 or more cards, instead you and that player each draw a card.
so you can take one of their draws.
Yep.
I can see them doing that kind of thing.
Yes.
Because that's not going to get played in standard. In a commander that's not remotely broken, and that probably feels in white. I'd take that. I would steal one person's card to bring a creature into play at the same time,
Right.
and get a free draw off.
It would be so fun if someone went wheel into Notion Thief, and then the other guy flashes in that cat, and everyone goes, "We get no cards, but you guys each get one."
Right.
Okay, that's how this is gonna work.
I think they could have done more with clues as well. I would like to see them, because that's a good mechanic for white that feels like it's something they can do.
Yes.
Yep. And we'll talk about this when we start diving into Ixalan, but the new treasure mechanic.
Yeah, which is similar to a clue mechanic.
Yep.
It makes mana, but
You can sack it for a draw.
that clearly indicates to me they're pretty comfortable now with these tokens that do a thing.
Yes.
Because we've got a couple more gold tokens in the new commander set, and we're getting the treasure ones coming up, and we've had the clues. So they could easily revisit clues now, I would think.
Yeah.
All right, I think we've talked about the strengths and weaknesses of white. We'll get into another color next time. We'll do blue next time, I guess, if we follow the color pie. But before we go, we'll stick to talking about white for our sign-out question here. What card in white do you think needs to see more play?
Do you have one, Chris?
I kind of went a little broad with mine, but I do have one, I guess.
What is it?
Let's hear it.
I believe, now I went really broad because this is going to go into other colors too, but I believe curses are underplayed.
Okay. The new white curse is not good.
No, not the new one, no. But just in general, I got cursed a couple weeks back with something that where it forced me to skip my draw step, or I couldn't activate it, or I activate abilities or something like that out of a white curse. And I had Necropotence out, so I couldn't activate that ability, so I pretty much missed my draw. So I think curses are underplayed. I went very broad with it. I'm sorry about that, guys.
No, that makes sense.
No, it works.
What do you got, Max?
You actually mentioned this earlier. Dawn Charm.
Dawn Charm is really good.
So good, and nobody plays it.
And what are the modes? So that's a fog mode.
It's prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn, or regenerate a target creature, or counter target spell that targets you.
Most of the time it winds up just being a holy day, like it winds up being a fog most of the time. But people get targeted with spells relatively frequently, and being able to save one creature to a board wipe, particularly if it's your Elish Norn or something, for the mana that you were saving just in case someone alpha struck you or something, that's a really good card.
Yes.
My answer here is going to be Tithe. I just started running it like 2 weeks ago because I bought that Dejero deck.
Yep.
And looking for like all the options to get card advantage or get lands. I'm like, okay, well, I'd seen Tithe before and I'd never ran it. And it's a 1 white instant. Search your library for a plains card. If you control fewer lands than target opponent, you can search for an additional plains card. So you can get 2 lands off it. For 1 mana, though, that's not bad. But the instant speed thing is what I hadn't really factored into being useful. With land tax, not that land tax isn't great, because it is, but on land tax, you have to, if you're like going first or something, you have to
Wait a turn
or something to get behind everybody else. With Tithe at 1 mana, if you're first, you're still probably ahead of somebody else. But if somebody 1 step ahead of you ramps with Kodama's Reach or ramps with whatever, you can immediately, like, before it comes back around to you, hit that Tithe at instant speed and get those lands in your hand for next turn. Or if you are in a position where it's turn 3 or something and you've made your first 2 land drops and you don't have that 3rd land drop, comes back around again. Well, before the end of the person in front of you's turn, bam, I'm drawing 2 lands. So my next 2 land draws are taken care of for 1 mana early in the game when maybe you weren't spending your mana anyway. I've loved it. Like, every time I've drawn it, it's done work for me.
How do you feel like late in the game when you draw it?
It's not as good then, but even then, the one time I've drawn it late game, I had a scroll rack out.
So you just pitched it?
And I had one. No, I took the 2. Okay. I took the 2 lands and pitched them to scroll, and then drew 2 with scroll rack.
Yep.
I didn't have a way to then
shuffle
them away, but at least it got me 2 cards for the 2 turns sooner than I would have got them, which is better than nothing at that point in time.
Yep.
So even late, it can be good. You don't want to. It's ideally not something you want to draw on turn 10. But your hand is empty so often in white that's And it's also plains, like you talked about Gift of Sight. It's also plains, so you can grab. I think Mistvale Plains is a plane, and
Duels.
yeah, and a duel if you're in a deck. Probably wouldn't run it. Maybe white blue, you might run it, or white red. You don't have
White
much
red,
ramp
you
in there
definitely
either.
run it in white red.
So I've been a big fan of Tithe so far, and it's on the reserve list. So
You
they're
and
not
your
printing it
reserve
again.
list.
But it's $5. It's a
Yep.
$5 card. It's relatively affordable for anybody. So I've loved it so far in that DeGiro deck. It's not an amazing card, but it's one that I would recommend running if you're playing mono white for sure. That is it for this week. I think we'll come back next week to talk about the Legends rule change because it's going to shake a lot of things up. Until then, I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.